Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything. I'm coming at you with a Let's Talk video. Now, we're going to be talking. I'm probably going to change the title of this video. I don't know exactly what I'm going to say, what I'm going to call it, but I'm just sitting here talking to you off the cuff, no script. What we're going to be talking about is my D&D game, my current D&D game, my players, their characters, our gaming situation, what happened in the game, stuff like that. So I just want to take maybe 15 minutes. I don't want to take a huge amount of time, but this is going to be an after action recap, right? AAR, which in the military we would call that an after action review, but we're going to call this an after action recap. And I'm going to tell you the players, a little bit about them, and over the course of these different reviews as we go, I'm going to shed more and more light about the characters. I'm not going to reveal everything in the first episode because I want to keep every episode short. And then I'm also going to talk about what happened in our game that night, and then but I'm going to deliberately leave out any behind the scenes information for the villains because I don't want the players to come back and watch these after action recaps and see what the villain's all about. So I want it to be a surprise for them, but I also want it to be a surprise for you. So if you watch these after action recaps, you will kind of like get immersed into the characters and be like, okay, I wonder what's going to happen to him next. I wonder what that villain's all about because Mr. Everything doesn't tell us anything. That's what I want. Okay, so let's talk about the party makeup. That's what we're going to talk about first. We have an elf, a high elf, monk. Okay, we have a high elf monk. We have a dwarven cleric of the Earth Mother. Okay, we have a halfling swashbuckler, and we have a half-orc noble fighter, and he took the knight variant. So he's a knight. He has one of his retainers with him. Stram Bloodwound is his squire, we'll call it, and he is accompanying him. Okay, so those are the four initial characters. And then we had two more people come and make characters, so we're at 6 at the table. We had a half-elf wizard. He's a charlatan illusionist. And then we had a human fighter, right? Battlemaster, I do believe is what he chose. So that's the party of 6. I started them in no names. We're going to reveal that as we go in future videos, what all their names are and stuff. I think they're still struggling with their names themselves, but I think a lot of them haven't really fleshed out their backgrounds. We used a book called Legends of Tomorrow. No, not Legends of Tomorrow, that's sci-fi. Heroes of Legend, or so, I don't remember what it's called. But what it is, it's a book to generate your background, and it has like 1,000,000 roles you got to make. You have like a social standing, a legitimacy modifier, and all the culture modifier and stuff like that. And then you roll all these dice, and you look at all these tables and charts, and it tells you like your mom died, or your grandfather was a sword master, or your like the halfling swashbuckler, he's the offspring of a halfling and a demon. So apparently this demon came in, maybe raped his mom or something like that. He was born and he has demon blood in him, so he gets some modifiers. He doesn't smell well all the time. He's got bad BO, but some of his stats could have been up or down, and it just so happens they roll all up, so he got a bonus of like a D3 on every stat. So he's pretty, and he's tall too. He's like you would think a halfling would be like so big. Well, he's like almost human size when it comes. It's weird, but either way, that's a halfling swashbuckler. Okay, so these guys I started them off in Waterdeep at the Yawning Portal because we are running the book Tales from the Yawning Portal. There's like 9 adventures in there, and they're all independent solo adventures that you can run as one-offs, but there's also a way to tie them all in as to a chain of events, and that's what I'm going to do. But I'm also going to put adventures in between, and I'm going to stitch together some grand campaign, but I haven't really fleshed it all out yet. That's to be honest with everyone, the players and the audience out there. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to stitch together the Tales of the Yawning Portal into an ongoing campaign. And the first one is the Sunless Citadel. Okay, so I started them in the Yawning Portal. There was a one-eyed dwarf, gave him a clue that there was a tree up at this town of Oakhurst that was spawning evil. And these guys being all these characters that are good, because I required all my players to be good, because that will give them motivation to do these quests, have decided to take on this quest. But because they all approached this guy independently, because they didn't know each other, but once they approached him and they all sat around the campfire listening to what he had to say, they all became friends at that point, or at least companions. And so they hired a boat to take them up to Neverwinter, where they got off the boat, and then they walked cross country for a couple of days. This is all pre-game, basically. They walked a couple of days to this town called Oakhurst. They arrived at Oakhurst pretty close to sundown, and that's where we started the game. And they go into, they find that there's a bar called the Old Boar Inn. They go in, they meet the tavern owner. He feeds them steak, because this town of Oakhurst is a cattle farms. They have a lot of like cows out in the fields. So steak is not that big of a deal. So they had like these real thick steaks to eat, and so they were sitting there eating. They paid their silver pieces or whatever, and they don't know what to do. This is their first encounter with any character in my game. This is the first time that these players are all working together, and because I kind of narrated the whole show all the way up to this town, so now this is the first time they're getting their feet wet. So they're all kind of stumbling upon what they need to do and how they need to do it. So I said, you know what, I'm going to have to kickstart this. So I had the mom of a couple of missing villagers, her son and daughter. She comes into the inn and she says, I heard there were some adventurers in town. I need you guys, or can you help me out? My children are missing. Right? And they're like, okay, what's going on? Calm down, have a seat, And then the bartender brings some water over to her and stuff. And she says, yeah, I'm my son and daughter left with a paladin and a ranger to go to the citadel. And I want you to go find them. If you can bring their signet rings back, I'll give you 125 gold. If you can bring them back in good condition, I'll double that. But it's been a month, so she just wants to know if they've died or how they died. She suspects that they already did die. And so, but if you can bring them back intact or alive or whatever, I'll double it, right? I'd be really grateful. And I'm the owner at the general store, so you'll get discounts or whatever. And they're like, all right, sounds good. That's why we're here anyway. We're we're here to we'll help you rescue your kids or whatever. Can you tell us about them, right? Well, she says her son, he's a warrior, and he fights if any goblins or hobgoblins or whatever come into town and they like come to steal cattle or whatever, he'll be the first one out there to fight them off, right? So he's like the sturdy warrior character. And my daughter, she went to Neverwinter for 4 years to train to be a wizard, and she came back and she's our like town wizard or whatever. And so they're like, oh cool, so they got a fighter and a wizard that they're going to go rescue, and they left it at that, right? And there were villagers that were like dropping hints at them like, oh yeah, nobody's ever visited that place in the last 6 months, or there's these apples that are coming into town and people are buying them because they're healing apples and stuff. So I'm dropping villagers are like making comments, but the players don't pick up on that. They don't, or they do, they do and don't care, or they don't, because they don't pursue these villagers to grill them. They didn't go over to the villagers and say, hey, can you tell us about these apples? Or, hey, could you tell us about the last time someone visited the town? Or can you tell us? No, they just said, oh, cool, someone else, no big deal. But they somehow they figured out that there's two apples. There's the red apple in the summer and the white apple in the winter. And villagers pay about 50 gold for these apples, and the apple has curative features, like it'll cure any disease or ailment or something like that, is the red apple. The white apple is kind of poisonous and will kill people or whatever, so nobody buys the white apple. Unless they're trying to kill rats in the basement or something, they might buy the white apple just so that they can create some kind of deadly poison for like killing rodents or something in their chicken coop or whatever. And it's about time for these goblins to come up and offer the red apple. So we don't know exactly when. It's because it's in the middle of the summer. So they decided, okay, let's go to the Citadel in the morning. So in the morning, they crash out at the inn. They get a room. Okay. Now, when they get the room, this is kind of a pusher that I can't really reveal everything about. But the knight character, Mason's character, he gets the half-orc. He gets a room, and he says, I'm going to, I'll sleep on the bed. And he goes, Stram, if you would please sleep with your back against the door. And he's like, do you need me to keep the door closed? And he's like, yeah, keep the door closed. He's like, okay, well, I'll stay here until you fall asleep, and then I will go downstairs to where my bunk is, because he's sleeping in the common room, the squire is, and then I'll go to sleep. And that way I'll stay here and keep you company until you fall asleep. And he's like, no, I need you to keep me safe. I need you to, because the doors in this inn don't have any locks, right? So there's no, all you have to do is just walk up to the door and open it. There's no locks. So the knight wanted his squire to protect him all night by sleeping against the door. And he basically realized that, or I'm not gonna say this because I don't want to reveal his motivations. But Stram says, he confronted him. He said, are you afraid to sleep in here by yourself overnight? And he said, yes, the doors are unlocked. Someone could walk into my room. He was like, okay, you're a coward. I'm leaving. And so he packed his bags and he started leaving. And then the half-orc knight approaches him and says, where are you going? You can't just leave me. He's like, I am going to leave you because I wanted to learn how it was to be a knight and to be brave, and you're in an inn with all these other non-nobles sleeping with open doors, and you're a knight and you're afraid to sleep with an open door. You're a coward. And says, I'm out of here. And so he goes, he won't leave, he's just joking. He leaves, he goes outside the inn, and the half-orc knight's like, what should I do, well, he's asking the other players, and they're all telling him, one guy says, I just go over there and smack him down. Another guy goes, you got to go stop him. You got to go talk him into it, or convince him that you're really a brave or whatever, right? And so he runs outside, but by then he's already asked the party a bunch of questions. By then the squire is halfway down the road. He's walking. He's leaving. It's after dark, but he doesn't care. He's out, right? Peace. This half-orc knight is going to get me killed. So he chases him down, he grabs him by the collar, and he says, you can't leave. And he's like, well, I'm leaving, and you can't stop me, even though he did. He's holding his collar. And then he goes, I made him make a couple of rolls, like persuasion and intimidation, and he failed both of these rules. And so the squire's like, nope, I ain't going. I'm fighting with you. No way. And he goes, okay, well, I'm going to drag him back to the inn. I'm going to physically drag him back. He failed. The squire is a skilled fighter, so he resisted the pull, and so the player, Mason, he didn't know what else to do. He's struggling, and so one of the players gave him inspiration so that he could re-roll his persuasion roll or whatever. So we took inspiration. I allowed him to re-roll after the fact, and so he rolled a d20 this time, and he actually did okay on his persuasion. And so he said his persuasion comment was, follow me into the Citadel tomorrow and I will prove to you that I'm not a coward. And he was like, okay, I'll go into the Citadel with you and I'll watch you and we'll see if I want to learn from you or not, or something like that, right? And so the party is kind of feeling like they made these comments that they think this squire was sent by his father to get like a trial or a test, or to observe him to see if he's worthy, because in his background he has this thing where he's trying to prove himself to his father, and he's kind of like being disowned by his dad or something like that. So he's out in the world trying to prove himself, and so they think that this squire is here, but is as a plant, basically as a spy. And I'm not revealing whether he is or isn't. I'm letting them think that. And so on the next day, they make the 3-hour walk over to the Citadel. And the Citadel is a castle that was built above ground. And then when Hotanau erupted about 200 years ago, or whatever the timeline is, that where the volcano erupted, a fissure in the ground opened up underneath the castle, and the castle fell into this fissure. So now you got this castle and this ravine, and it's like inside the rock, and there's like this 80-foot ravine that they are looking down into to see the castle at the bottom. And there's some plinths up at the top, or some pillars or whatever, and there's one of them that has a rope tied that goes down to this ledge. It's about 50 feet down. No, not even that. Maybe 30 feet. No, 50 feet down. And 80. Oh, so it's like 130 feet, because there's 50 foot down to this ledge, and then 80 more feet down these switchback stairs. They climb down the rope. They fight a couple of giant rats, and then they take the trail down to the bottom, and then the rogue discovers that there's a pit trap right there in front of the door. They disable it. They go in the door. They see some dead goblins, and then they decide, hey, let's go to the left door. They search. It's a round tower room. They search the front half. They did not search the back half. So nothing was to be discovered in the front half except 2 doors. So they take the left door, and that goes into a room that has a locked door, with a dragon logo face etched on it. So they decide, let's go ahead and pick that lock. Well, the rogue can't pick it. He rolls really well, but not good enough. Can't pick it. And then the wizard says, oh, by the way, there's also an arcane lock on it, so you got to get past both or use the key, and they don't have the key. So they said, okay, never mind, let's just go the other way. So they went to the other door, and they went about halfway down. There's a door on the left that opens up to a still, and there's a bung, which is basically, they call it a bung because it's a barrel, and there's a hole drilled in the barrel, and there's a cap. They call it's a bung hole with a cap. And so they find this big metal bung cover on this cask, and the cask has pipes and tubes coming out of it and into the floor. So they think it's either a still or a water system or something. They don't know what it is. So they pop the top off, and when they do, a steam method and an ice method pop out and fight the party. They take a few points of damage here and there, and they kill the ice and steam method. Actually, they back out of the room and close the door, but after about 3 rounds, the methods break out. The whole time, the squire's back there, eyeballing the knight, like, why aren't you in there? Why aren't you fighting? Giving him one of those eyeball looks, like, okay, so you're proving that you're brave? Okay. And, but they do finally kill the methods, and they explode and cause the party some grief. And then the party moves on. They're like, okay, we've taken a few hits, a few lumps, let's keep moving. So what they're trying to find is the wizard and the fighter, but also this tree. So they've got like 3 things they're looking for. And so far they haven't found it. So they come into a room where there is, and this is where we end it at this room, but they come into a room where there's someone sniveling under a blanket, boo-hoo, right? Sniffle, sniffle, boo-hoo. And so they go over there. It's like a child. They go over there to help him or her. And when they do, he pokes his eyes out like, oh, I'm so sad. And what they found out is they met this kobold that was unhappy because the dragon that he was watching and taking care of broke out of its cage, or goblins broke it out of its cage and captured the dragon and stole the dragon, and that was like their patron deity or whatever, was that dragon, and that they had locked up. But so he was sad, and then they said, okay, well we'll help you find your dragon. So now they got 4 things they got to deal with, and that's where we ended it. So that's where we're going to start tomorrow night. Actually, we're going to start with them talking to this kobold, and this kobold leading them down a different trail, basically, which could or could not, might or might not be a good thing. We don't know. All right, guys. Well, that was a recap and a little insight into the game that we're playing on Thursday nights. And this Thursday, we should start straight into the action and a little bit less character creation at the beginning and background making and overland travel and backstory for the adventure and stuff like that. That took up maybe half the night, and then the adventure didn't actually get started until about 8 o'clock or whatever. But this time it should start right at maybe 6, and then we'll move on to, we play 4 hours, 10, like 6 to 10 or something like that, 6 to 10:30, and maybe 6:30 to 10:30, something like that. But we're not streaming it because I don't want to set up all the cameras and tear all the cameras down, and the players, they change the way they role play when they're on camera, and we don't want to do that. All right, guys, hopefully this was a short video, and I'll see you next time.